How do we draw a scene such as this that in some ways appears almost impossible to draw with a pen? There is just so much detail. How can we capture bushland or forest settings, many nature situations in fact, where the superabundance of lots of very small and repeated objects really becomes overwhelming when we think of drawing it with a line? It's different to having pencil or charcoal where we can smudge and create other effects. Well, I think that word effects is still the key. We need to think of creating effects, but we use line to do that. So, for a scene such as this, it's going to take a bit of commitment. There'll be quite a few lines that we need, but the more important thing is to get our thinking in the right groove, to look at our drawing and not be thinking, well, this is a tree, this is the bush, and then to try and draw a tree or a bush, because that's probably not going to end up being very credible with all the trees and all the bushes, and trying to also keep distinction as to what's what, that this is where one plant ends and another one begins, or this is all one type of plant, or these are close and these are far away. There's a lot of detail to capture as well. But in fact, when we look at the photo, we don't see all the detail. If we look in any one part of the photo, we can see a lot of detail. But when we just look at the whole photo, at the whole scene, what we see is the effect of all that detail at once. And that's what we're going to try and draw. We're drawing the effect. And I think in reality, this is always what we do. We're putting marks on the paper, sometimes they're lines, sometimes they're other things, to create an effect, a certain visual effect. So the first thing I'm doing though is I'm establishing the main players. In a scene such as this, I always go for the closest trees and the closest shrubs, and I'm using a heavier pen. This is a 0.3 millimeter pen. I use it for that rock ledge in the foreground, the very lower foreground, and for the main trees, the closest ones, and basically all the shrubs lower down on the ground that are forward from these trees. Because using a 0.3 millimeter pen will give me a thicker line, and that will create a different effect to when I use a 0.2 and a 0.1 millimeter pen in the same drawing. Because what I'm going to do, my aim is, as I go further back in the depth of plane of the scene, I want to create a lighter effect. And using a lighter pen is part of how we do that. Because objects further back lighten in value and become less distinct, less clear. Their edges even become less defined. And so a lighter pen is going to be more helpful in creating that effect. And it's certainly easier than trying to draw a lighter line with a heavier pen. Because all of these shrubs have indistinct edges, none of them suit a straight line. I'm really just doing a lot of dots to indicate the tops of shrubs or of smaller bunches of leaves of the one shrub, because generally these are going to be created not by an outline, but by having a shadow come down over the top and maybe coming up from the bottom to define. They're going to be really defined by negative space. We're going to see the object by the dark value of the space around it. But it is important I know what's where. So at this point, I'm particularly just getting some of the major tops of the major shrubs, certainly in the lower half of the drawing, in place. Now, there are certain things about the scene that really interest me and that are the reason why I chose this, well, the reason why I took the photo and then decided I would draw it. But for a lot of the detail here, approximate is going to be good enough. I don't need to do everything slavishly. But what I want to try and do is keep the sense of scale the same. That in my drawing, the trees look as large as these trees are, and the shrubs look like shrubs. And the trees further back still feel as if they're large trees, but further back. Now, of course, at this stage, I finished the drawing and I'm looking back, and I feel that a lot of it I was happy with. I feel like I got too dark, too high, and I should have kept my very furthest values lighter, but you can see what you think when we get there. You'll notice I did that dark tree on the left dark now because I want it to be a dark tree, and therefore it's going to be one of the stronger values on the overall scene. So I want to know how dark that is so that I can reference the other darknesses and lightnesses of it, because we read value according to the value around it. What we want to avoid is too many midtones. I want areas that are lighter and areas that are darker, and the danger when we use a pen to create value, as we're doing now, is that we just don't stop quickly enough, and we put too many lines on too large an area, and we get a lot of mid-tone, which can end up flattening what we see. We really want to aim for generally more lighter tones, more darker tones, and try and minimize the mid-tones in between. There is a lot of bushland on this. This took me about an hour and a quarter in real life to draw, which is longer than most of my YouTube drawings. There just was a lot. See, I think the darker value in the middle area looks quite good at that, and I wish I'd kept it lighter above that, but I used pretty much that same value going up higher again, which I think just tends to flatten the sense of depth. If you can imagine above that line being a lot lighter, it does give a sense, the sense I think that we see in the reference of moving right back to some more distant ridge, that we're really just getting a sense of all of the trees on that ridge as one value pretty much. Now, what's particularly important with a scene like this, and it's harder to do with a photo than real life, is to be aware of what's closest and what's further back, because I really want to draw all the closest things before I draw the things behind them, because, well, it's ink, I can't erase any lines. And so I don't want to have lines going through objects that are closer, because that will also mess with the sense of spacing of distance. And it's often very effective that where something goes in front of something else, to not actually bring the line up right to the line that goes across it, but to leave a very slight gap. Visually, it helps to create just a bit of a halo effect, which enhances the effect. How often I use the word effect these days, that enhances the effect of this is in front of that. And that's very helpful visually to help the brain untangle what's where. I mean, we want it to be a bit of a tangle because that's the effect we're trying to draw. In the Australian bush is well and truly a tangle. However, we don't want it to be so tangled that we can't distinguish anything at all. We want to create a sense of what's in it and where it is still. So you can see what I'm doing now. I'm using a lot of generally vertical lines for hatching because it really is just the value. There's nothing about the trees that are further back that I can draw that is in any way going to help make the scene read better in my line work. But I do want the value. I do want that sense of light and dark coming through from the furthest back trees. Now I think you're watching this at 5 times my drawing pace. If you want to see it slower, you can use the cog icon to slow it down to half this speed, which will take it much closer to my actual drawing time. And hey, if you're finding this interesting, please hit the like button. And if you've got friends who draw, please share my videos with them, because it really is a help to me. What I'm doing continually and need to do continually is to stop looking at the little part that I'm intensely focused on and doing the marks for, and stand back. Often looking through the camera gives a better sense of this, but to see what the overall effect of lights and darks, the overall effect that I'm creating, with my marks to see how that's going. To think, are there some white spaces that I need to really work hard at preserving to absolutely not put any more lines on? Or are there too many mid-sections, mid-value sections? Now, I can't make them lighter, but I can make some of them darker, though that may mean I need to adjust other dark areas to make them darker as well, so that darker areas stay relatively darker after I darken this. These are all the continual ongoing assessments that we need to do with a scene like this, because it's not so much what any one detail is, it's the overall effect. I just said effect again. So now I'm doing leaves that are further back, and I'm not making any marks that are meant to represent any individual leaves. I really am just wanting to create the value, the sense of value that we get. So these are bunches of trees, bunches of leaves that are higher up and further back. And now there are some leaves that are quite close, that are hanging on a branch that's coming towards us and hanging down. They're actually probably from that tree, the whitish tree on the right. And so I do those, and at the very end, you'll see me increase those darker leaves. Not that they're in the reference, but I felt that it just looked a bit odd, looked a bit not quite enough, like I'd forgotten to do some. I thought it was distracting in a negative way. So I just added a few more leaves on each side in that same weight of line and style, creating the same value, just to make it visually, to my mind, look more balanced. So here I am going too far. This is, you can see the uppermost part is really too dark, and even the part a bit below that is probably a bit dark. And again, at the end, you'll see me darken the lower section to try and make the midsection look a little less dark, because we read value from value. So I couldn't make that middle section lighter, so I made the lower section darker. And this is where it's easy to stop too soon, and it's easy to stop too late. I picked up the wrong pen. So 3 pens for this, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1 millimeters. And here I am now darkening these lower sections to make them come closer, because darker values come closer. I don't know whether I should have left that tree white. It's not white, it is actually in light shade. So, but visually it might have worked better, or to have put less hatching line on it. So now there's a tree there with very distinct leaves that I increased the leaves for, so it was a bit more obvious what they were. And in the end, people aren't looking at our reference. Do what will make our drawing work better. I think that's always the answer. So again, I'm still making those most distant lines darker, which I think was a problem. But better or worse, here it is, although I did add a few lines to it after I turned off the camera. But I guess you won't see those unless I use this drawing in the thumbnail, which I don't think I'm going to do. And that's it. We have it. Now, there I am, just adding those leaves up the top. Do you think that helps? G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I think this way of thinking, this technique of drawing, of not trying to draw objects, but looking at what we see and try to understand what's the effect, visually, what's the effect of the totality of all the things in this scene. Now, how can I capture that effect, not those objects, but that effect in my drawing? I think this is the key to drawing the impossible. At least it's certainly been of benefit to me. And of course, you'll find this reference on my channel community page if you want to have a go at drawing the impossible. And maybe I should draw it again and try and get that middle distance area a bit more happily, creating the sense of distance that I want. But hey, whatever you draw, however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.